Dear viewers, why now there is political crisis in Bangladesh? Why there is a demand for free and fair election? And why the people of Bangladesh cannot trust the current government under Sheikh Hasina to hold the next general election in 2023.
During the past few months, the government has clamped down on the opposition Bangladesh Nationalist Party. Several people have been shot dead by police, hundreds injured, and thousands have been arrested at rallies across the country. But it didn't stop tens of thousands of opposition supporters from gathering in Dhaka on Saturday.
This video is created to understand why Bangladesh needs to restore its previous system of holding election under a caretaker government. In fact, it was a political settlement among major political parties, including the current party in power, Awami League. But in 2011, the system was abolished by a unilateral decision of the current ruling party, Awami League. Since then, 2 elections were held, none of which were free, fair, and credible. There had been many allegations of vote rigging, intimidation, harassment, and arrests of opposition parties' leaders and workers.
Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has secured a 3rd term in office after a landslide victory in the country's general election. The Electoral Commission says Sheikh Hasina's coalition won 288 of 300 seats in Parliament in Sunday's vote. But the election was tarnished by violence as well as accusations of vote rigging and voter suppression. Opposition leader Kamal Hossain has called for new elections. Both the ruling party and the opposition reported attacks on their supporters and candidates. Over a dozen people were killed during violence on the election day.
Example of this ballot box stuffing. So police officers stuffed the ballot box on the previous night. I didn't hear any similar example in any other country. So ballot box stuffing should never be repeated.
The Awami League is in power 3 consecutive terms, about 15 years. Here we present a brief history of how the electoral system, including the Election Commission, bureaucracy, law enforcement, and other institutions, was politicized to ensure only partisan election results. Although Bangladesh was created with the vision of establishing the people's right to self-determination, the rulers from the very outset failed to hold free and fair elections. To remedy this, in 1996 the 13th Amendment of the Constitution was enacted, ushering in the provision of the caretaker government, which represented a political consensus. In fact, it was a political settlement among major political parties because Awami League, current ruling party, waged a mass movement and was able to compel the then ruling party, BNP, to accept people's demand, and the constitution was amended accordingly. This arrangement not only ensured free and fair elections, but also created equal opportunity for all political parties to come to power. Thus, NCG represented a settled matter regarding holding election for peaceful transfer of power in Bangladesh politics. It was indeed a positive reform towards peaceful transfer of power, but the political parties were not keen on sustaining this system to keep its real objective intact for which it was created. The first blow to the caretaker system was dealt in 2004, when the BNP government passed, with ulterior motives, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, extending the retirement age for judges of the higher judiciary. The second blow was dealt to the NCG by the Appellate Division through its divided short order of May 10, 2010. In this order, Chief Justice ABM Khairul Haq prospectively declared the caretaker government system unconstitutional after the 2014 and 2018 election, even though 2 high court benches had earlier ruled that the 13th Amendment was constitutional. However, the final blow to the NCG came on June 30, 2011, when it was abolished, about 15 months before the full verdict of the Appellate Division was published, through the unilateral enactment of the 15th Amendment to the Constitution in a majoritarian manner. The passage of the 15th Amendment in essence transformed the Constitution into a weapon. On July 21, 2011, a 15-member Special Parliamentary Committee was formed for amending the Constitution in light of the judgments of the higher judiciary, and 12 of the members of the committee were senior leaders of Awami League. On the basis of its consultations with 104 distinguished persons including a former president, the present Prime Minister, 3 former Chief Justices, political leaders, editors, and members of the civil society, the Special Committee, on May 29, 2011, unanimously recommended to amend the Constitution keeping the caretaker government system, with a 3-month tenure. The committee members met with the Prime Minister on the next day, after which its recommendations changed, and it proposed a constitutional amendment with no provision for the caretaker government. A press briefing was held on May 31, in which it was claimed that the court had declared the caretaker government system unconstitutional, with an observation that the Parliament's approval would be needed if the next 2 parliamentary elections were to be held under a caretaker government.
Unfortunately, this was not true. The Appellate Division, in its short order of the 10th of May, gave no such observation. It is thus clear that the 15th Amendment of the Constitution was passed, before the full judgment of the court was published, to abolish the caretaker government, disregarding the Special Parliamentary Committee's unanimous recommendations, and it is based on a misleading interpretation of the court's short order. This was a self-interested decision taken on the part of the ruling party. In making the decision to enact the 15th Amendment, the pleas of the amicus curiae to keep the NCG were also ignored. The amendment required holding of future national elections under the party in power and the stewardship of the same Prime Minister rather than under a caretaker government. Experts have questioned the legitimacy and constitutionality of the 15th Amendment. The Constitution reflects the will of the people, Article 7, and any amendment without their consent is not legitimate. While the original Constitution of 1972 had no provision for referendum, this was included in the Constitution through the Fifth Amendment, though the Supreme Court later found the Fifth Amendment unconstitutional. However, by consensus between Awami League and BNP, the provision for referendum was added to the Constitution in 1991 through the 12th Amendment. But, in reality, no referendum was held to get the people's consent before the passage of the 15th Amendment. The constitutional validity of the 15th Amendment is questionable on many grounds. Firstly, by passing this amendment without holding the referendum, Article 142 of the Constitution was violated. Secondly, the Prime Minister's rejection of the unanimous recommendation of the Special Parliamentary Committee to keep the NCG was a violation of the principle of separation of powers. Thirdly, about 1/3 of the Constitution was made unamendable by the 15th Amendment. Only the basic structure of the Constitution is unamendable. So, by rendering almost 1/3 of the Constitution unamendable, the Parliament gave those newly designated articles the status of the basic structure, which itself is a violation of the doctrine of basic structure. Such changes are unconstitutional in another way. According to constitutional expert Mahmoudul Islam, one Parliament cannot bind the successor Parliament. To conclude, the scrapping the political settlement of 1996 through the 15th Amendment and creating the provision to hold Parliament elections under the party in power, there has been an all-encompassing politicalization, including the politicization of the Election Commission, bureaucracy, law enforcement agencies and every other institutions, causing the breakdown of our electoral system. Consequently, our last 2 Parliament elections were failed elections. Unless now another political settlement can be arrived at regarding the election time government, our next election will inevitably be controversial, which will push us, as a nation, towards an uncharted course.